Eduardo Saverin, the billionaire who was erased. Imagine being worth $7 billion and still being the one who got screwed. Eduardo Saverin put up the first $15,000 that started Facebook. He was CFO. He owned 34% of the company, but Mark Zuckerberg made sure he'd end up with less than 5%. This is the story of how a handshake agreement with your best friend can cost you $10 billion and the 3 brutal lessons Eduardo learned too late. The origin. 2003, Harvard University. Eduardo Saverin was everything you'd want in a co-founder. Brazilian-born, brilliant with numbers, president of the Harvard Investment Association. He wasn't just smart with money, he came from it. His father was a successful businessman in Brazil. February 2004, Eduardo writes the check. $15,000. In today's money, that's about $25,000. Pocket change for what they were building. But it was everything Facebook needed. The deal was simple. Mark will code. Eduardo would handle the business, the money, the advertising deals. 65% for Mark, 30% for Eduardo, about 5% for Dustin Moskovich. They incorporated it in Florida, Eduardo's home state. He was CFO, co-founder, Mark's official partner. Facebook exploded. Within months, it wasn't just Harvard. It was Stanford, Yale, Columbia, hundreds of thousands of users. Eduardo was in New York that summer, doing what he promised, landing advertising deals, bringing in revenue. Meanwhile, in California, Mark was having different conversations. Sean Parker had just entered the picture, Napster founder, Silicon Valley hustler. He saw Facebook's potential, and he saw Eduardo as a problem. Not technical enough, not ambitious enough, not California enough. And Mark was listening. The Betrayal. Summer 2004, Eduardo gets called to a meeting. They need to reincorporate in Delaware. Standard stuff for tech companies. New documents to sign. Eduardo's in New York, focused on ad sales, trusting his partner. He signs. What Eduardo didn't understand, what Mark and the lawyers made sure wasn't clear, was what was buried in those documents. A clause, innocent looking, devastating in practice. It allowed the company to issue new shares without offering them to existing shareholders first. It's called dilution, and it's about to be Eduardo's biggest nightmare. October 2004, Eduardo's in Boston for a meeting. Mark barely looks at him. The lawyers hand him documents. Just formalities, they say. Eduardo's equity, 34%, down to 24%. Wait, what? He didn't sell anything. He didn't give anything up. But overnight, millions of new shares had been created, given to new investors, to employees, not to Eduardo. His percentage was cut by a third while he wasn't looking. But it gets worse. They'd frozen him out also. His company credit card declined. His access to bank accounts revoked. His co-founder, his friend, had begun erasing him. Yes, the thing about betrayal, it's not just what they take from you, it's that they make you complicit in your own destruction. Eduardo had signed the documents. He trusted. He'd been busy building the business while they were busy erasing his name from it. By 2005, more dilution. Eduardo was down to under 10%. The company he'd funded, was now valued at hundreds of millions, and he owned less of it than the guy who joined 6 months in. The final insult? They tried to take his co-founder title. Mark wanted Eduardo's name removed from the company history entirely, as if he'd never existed. The fight and the lesson. Eduardo lawyered up. 2009, he sued. Not for all of it. The lawsuit was specific. He wanted his co-founder status recognized. He wanted fair equity. He wanted his name back. And here's what Eduardo understood that changed everything. Mark needed to settle. Facebook was about to go public. A messy lawsuit from a co-founder? That could tank the IPO. That was leverage. The lawsuit settled in 2009. Terms confidential. But we know what happened. Eduardo got his co-founder title back. His name restored. And his equity adjusted back up approximately 5% of Facebook. May 2012, Facebook goes public at $38 a share. Eduardo Saverin's 5%, worth approximately $2 billion in a single day. Today, that stake is worth over $7 billion. So yes, Eduardo is a billionaire. Yes, he won. But think about what he lost. If he'd kept his original 30%, he'd be worth $42 billion as of the IPO. That's $10 billion percentage point Mark took from him. The math is brutal. The lesson is clear. Eduardo's 3 brutal lessons. Lesson 1. Get it in writing. Every term, every promise, every percentage point. Handshake deals with friends are what you can prove in court. Lesson 2. Understand dilution. Anti-dilution protection isn't paranoia. It's survival. The moment you give up control over share issuance, you give up control over your ownership. Lesson 3. In business, lawyers beat friends and friendship. Every single time. Mark chose lawyers. Eduardo chose trust. Mark won. Eduardo Saverin lives in Singapore now. He renounced his US citizenship before the IPO, saving hundreds of millions in taxes, which made him a villain in American media for about a week. But here's the thing they don't tell you about that story. Eduardo had already been erased once, already been betrayed by the country that promised him the American dream. Looked like Mark Zuckerberg's dorm room and Sean Parker's connections. So he took his billions and left. He still won't talk about Mark. He's moved on, but the story remains a reminder, a warning. $7 billion, and he's still the one who got screwed. That's the betrayal. Next time, we are covering the Snapchat co-founder who was written out of history for $158 million. Make sure you're subscribed. Thank you. See you in the next one.